Warning: this podcast contains graphic content. Trigger warnings include descriptions of violence, torture, murder, and rape. Some episodes may include offenses against children. Please listen with caution, as this podcast is not meant for everyone. In 2006, the Richardson family, Deborah, her husband Mark, and their 8-year-old son Jacob, were found brutally murdered in their home. What seemed like a senseless act of violence would soon unravel a twisted tale of betrayal, manipulation, and a dark secret hiding in plain sight. But what made this case even more chilling was the identity of the killers. Their preteen daughter Jay and her much older boyfriend Jeremy, who was 9 years her senior. What causes a 12-year-old to murder her entire family? In this episode, we'll explore the shocking events leading up to the Richardson murders, the eerie motivations behind them, and the unsettling truth that would come to light in the aftermath. This is the story of the Richardson family. So grab your favorite mug, pour yourself a fresh cup of coffee, and join me as we dive into this mysterious case. I'm Shanda, and every week I'll take you through a deep dive into the dark shadows of true crime while sipping on a cup of joe. This week I made a nice little salted caramel mocha for the episode, and I hope everyone had wonderful holidays. I spent mine with my family up the lake. We went ice fishing, didn't really catch much, but it was still really fun. Honestly, the best memories of mine are with my grandma and everyone under her, like my aunties and my cousins. We all had a blast. And I'm sure you noticed I didn't post an episode last week, and that's because I ended up getting sick and my voice was not going to work for a whole episode. Plus, I was working my butt off and just trying to stay alive. So thank you, Tylenol cold and flu. I do want to shout out BC in Australia. I see you have started listening and I appreciate that. Thank you. If you have any episode suggestions or opinions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And just a reminder that every week I post pictures on Instagram and threads that go along with every episode. And you can find me at missing.murdered.macchiatos. It's also linked in the description because I know it's a lot to type out. But I'm happy to be back. Happy New Year's, and let's get on with this week's episode. This is Missing, Murdered, and Macchiatos. This story starts in the year 1990. It was a time where big hair, choker necklaces, Discmans, and Beanie Babies were all the rage. The Game Boy was first released, and Super Nintendo was not long after that. Then came dial-up internet, which introduced everyone to a whole new world that you could have never imagined. 26-year-old Jean-Marc Richardson met 32-year-old Deborah Doolin at a gym in Sudbury, Ontario. The two were recovering addicts determined to turn their life around and create the sober life that they desired. In 1993, Deborah found out she was pregnant and gave birth to their daughter, who I will be referring to as Jay, on October 21st. I'll explain later why I'm going to refer to her as Jay, but a year after they gave birth to their daughter, Jean-Marc and Deborah got married, and then 4 years after that, the family relocated to Okotoks, Alberta, and moved into an older, 2-level split home. A small town of roughly 8,500 people, and was only a 15-minute drive from the big city of Calgary, Alberta. Okotoks is known for its 16,500-ton glacial erratic, which is just another name for a huge rock, that is located 7 kilometers west of the town. An interesting fact is that before European settlement, the Blackfoot tribe used the rock to help them locate a nearby river crossing. In the Blackfoot language, Okotok is similar to a word that means rock, which helped name the town. Shortly after the family relocated, Deborah gave birth to their second child, Tyler, in 1998. Now, Tyler often goes by the name Jacob, which is his middle name, so I don't want you to get confused. But with Deborah and Jean-Marc still getting on their feet, they initially struggled with paying bills and had to rely on food banks to feed the family. After a few more years of hard work and saving, Jean-Marc received a job promotion in 2005, allowing the family to move and buy a house in Medicine Hat, Alberta. Medicine Hat is 282 kilometers or 175 miles southeast of Okotoks. At the time, it was a city of 56,000 people, known for its large natural gas reserves and the world's tallest Samis teepee, measuring 215 feet tall. It was originally built in 1988 for the Winter Olympics to pay tribute to Indigenous cultures in Canada. The family's life in Medicine Hat started out successful, and the children were enrolled in a local Catholic school. Jay was described as a sociable, outgoing girl. She was a straight-A student and always made the honor roll. She enjoyed fine arts, spending time with her friends, and goth subculture. In the summer of 2005, the family had a computer and access to the internet, so Jay began using the internet more and more frequently. Jay and her new friends started hanging out at the Medicine Hat Mall, where she was introduced to a group of goth teens. They then started modeling themselves after them, and Jay's behavior started to become a concern when she started violating the school's dress code and started arguing and talking back to her parents. She had many social media profiles that she had created while lying about her age, like MySpace, Nexopia, and Zorpia. Her screen name was Runaway Devil, and she claimed to be a 15-year-old bisexual Wiccan that drank alcohol and was into, quote, kinky shit, like scarification. She also listed Jeffrey Dahmer and Marilyn Manson as her heroes and posted inappropriate pictures online. While at the mall in January of 2006, 12-year-old Jay was introduced to 23-year-old Jeremy Steinecke, and the two quickly became close friends, attending local concerts and the mall together. Now, Jay did look a lot older than 12, but she did still look like a child, and Jeremy had told her that he was a 300-year-old werewolf that loved the taste of blood, and he even wore a vial of blood on a necklace. They would often talk over social media platforms and eventually started dating, even after her parents told her that this man was bad news and he was way too old to be dating a 12-year-old. This caused her relationship between her and her parents to be strained as they struggled to control their 12-year-old daughter. Jay had begun sneaking out of the house, going to hang out with Jeremy without permission, and was expressing feelings of running away from home and wanting to go into foster care to get away from her family and their rules. During this time, she began developing a hate for her younger brother Jacob. She would purposefully embarrass him in front of others, and one time when she was left alone to babysit him, Jeremy came over and witnessed Jay strangle her little brother. Jacob had started telling other family members that he was scared of his older sister, which escalated when Jay left her 8-year-old brother home alone on 2 separate occasions while she was meant to be babysitting him. Jean-Marc and Deborah had tried punishing Jay by grounding her and taking away her electronics, but Jay was a stubborn preteen and nothing was going to stop her. Jean-Marc and Deborah were trying to repair their relationship with their daughter and decided to take her to a punk rock concert to show their support. But that night at the concert, they noticed that Jay had snuck away, and she was later caught making out with Jeremy in the back alley. This was Jay's breaking point. Her parents were ruining her life, and she started fantasizing about the life she and Jeremy could live if her parents were dead. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jeremy. He was born on January 15th, 1983, and according to him, his childhood was riddled with physical abuse at the hands of his father and 2 of his stepfathers. Jeremy had never really had a stable environment growing up, as he and his mother were constantly moving around because of the violence and the chaos in their home. This life had caused him to have difficulties with making friends, as they were never in one place long enough for him to form a true friendship, as well as kids bullying him for his last name, referring to him as Stinky. He was diagnosed with ADHD and put in a program for developmentally disabled youth, which caused him more bullying, and by the time Jeremy was 14, he was drinking alcohol. And since his mother's significant others usually had an alcohol addiction, alcohol was easily accessible. A while later, he moved on from alcohol to harder things, like mushrooms, acid, ecstasy, and marijuana. He started self-harming by cutting himself, and not long later, he dropped out of high school. When Jeremy was 16 years old, he moved out of his mother's house and into his father's house, but after an argument with his stepmother, he moved out. Eventually, he enrolled himself at Medicine Hat College to get his GED while working at Tim Hortons and doing an oil trade apprenticeship. But all of that came to an end and he quit looking for work. He too was into goth subculture, dressing in all black, wearing dark eyeliner, shaving his head, face paint, and listening to heavy metal music. He then started recruiting younger teens and adults to join his goth group, all while allegedly supplying them with drugs and alcohol. There was a social networking website that he had a profile on that stated he liked to kill prostitutes and play with and eat their insides, as well as a fellow individual that shape-shifted into werewolves. Believe it or not. One time while baking cookies with a friend, they made the cookies with human blood, and he described them as pink from how much blood they put in them. And he also listed his dislikes, which included pigs, meaning police, and black folks, but obviously he used the way more degrading word just to really show his power? I don't know. During his relationship with 12-year-old Jay, he claims that he never knew she was only 12 and that she had lied about her age, but his friends had expressed disgust about dating an underage girl and encouraged him to break up with her. In 2006, he was living with his mother in a trailer and was unemployed. Obviously, because how do you have the time and energy to hang out at the mall, plan a murder, and commit felonies while working a regular job? So after being caught sneaking out of the concert and making out with Jeremy in the back alley, Deborah and Jean-Marc grounded Jay. The age difference between them was extremely inappropriate. But that wouldn't stop Jay and Jeremy from messaging on multiple social media platforms, including Nexopia. In March of 2006, Jay's social media page said, "Welcome to my tragic end." And she sends Jeremy a disturbing message. It started by saying, quote, "I hate them, so I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you," unquote. Jeremy replies, his screen name Soul Eater, saying, quote, "Well, I love your plan, but we need to get a little more creative with the details and stuff," unquote. This is when they start planning out her family's demise, and Jeremy posts a gruesome poem hinting at the near future. It read, quote, "My girlfriend's family are totally unfair. They'd say that they really care. They don't know what is going on. They just assume as their greed continues to consume. She is slowly going insane. She continues to think that I came into her life to help her out. And stop what they keep trying to shout. It's all total bullshit. Their throats I want to slit. They will regret the shit that they have done, especially when I see to it that they are gone. They shall pay for their insolence. Finally, there shall be silence. Their blood shall be payment," unquote. On April 20th, Jeremy writes on his friend's social media page, quote, "I, on the other hand, would rather do morbid stuff to others, like Jax's rents, for example, which is what I'm gonna do this weekend," unquote. The night of April 22nd, Jeremy and his friends watch a movie called Natural Born Killers. It's a movie from 1994 about two victims of traumatic childhoods that become lovers and mass murderers. He tells his friends that he and Jay should live out their dreams in a similar way, and not spare her little brother's life. Later that night and early into the morning of April 23, 2006, Jeremy Steinecke, intoxicated with alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy, arrived at the Richardson house to carry out the sinister plan. He was dressed in all black and wearing a mask. He crawled through the basement window and made just enough noise to wake up Deborah, who came downstairs to see the commotion. When she saw Jeremy, he lunged at her with a knife, slashing and stabbing her. Jean-Marc upstairs heard his wife screaming and came down to see what was happening. He saw Jeremy stabbing his wife, and having been just woken up and full of adrenaline, Jean-Marc grabbed a screwdriver and jabbed Jeremy in his eye. However, with all of the drugs in his system, Jeremy was able to overpower Jean-Marc and started stabbing him over and over again. Jean-Marc's last words were to ask, "Why?" To which Jeremy replied, "Because it's what your daughter wanted." During this violent act, 8-year-old Jacob was woken up to the screaming of his parents and the commotion of the fight going on downstairs. He was frightened and gripping his toy lightsaber. Jacob tried his hardest to fight off his attacker, even using a lightsaber, but sadly his attacker stabbed him multiple times and slit his throat. After Deborah, Jean-Marc, and Jacob lay there dead in a pile of blood, Jeremy leaves the house frantically, speeding away in his truck, leaving Jay behind to clean up. Jay rinses off the knife used to kill her brother, packed her bag with her clothes and her toiletries, grabbed her mother's purse, and walked to the nearest 7-Eleven. She withdrew cash at the ATM and then called a taxi that took her to Jeremy's trailer. When she got to the trailer, her and Jeremy had non-consensual sex, because she is a minor, and then attended a nearby house party. People at the party stated Jay was laughing and conversing with others joyously, as well as sitting in Jeremy's lap and making out with him passionately. Jeremy was showing off his eye injury, and initially people at the party saw no indications of the gruesome triple murder that they had just committed hours prior, until Jeremy blurted out that he, quote, "gutted his girlfriend's family like a fish," unquote, to which she had added, quote, "my little brother gargled," unquote. After the party ended, they left with a friend that introduced them, another friend named Casey Lancaster, and another teenage girl. They then fled to Leader, Saskatchewan, a town approximately 162 kilometers or 100 miles northeast of Medicine Hat. Around 1 p.m. on April 23, 2006, the family's 6-year-old neighbor asked his mother if he could go play with Jacob. She agreed, and he ran next door to go see if they could play. He knocked and knocked, but there was no answer. Being the curious little guy he was, he peered into the basement window with his face squished up against the glass and his hands around his face blocking the glare. What he saw was a horrifying scene. His friend's mom was sprawled across the floor in a pile of blood. Terrified, he ran back home and told his mother what he saw. She had told him, "You better not be lying," and went to check it out. After what she saw, she immediately ran back home and called 911. When police arrived, they see the body through the window and break down the front door. They found the walls smeared with bloody handprints and the body of Deborah sprawled on the kitchen floor. In the corner, they see another body, sitting and curled up, covered with blood and holding a screwdriver in his hands. At first, they thought he was the attacker, but soon realized it was a second dead body, that of Jean-Marc. It had appeared that they had been stabbed to death, but not by the screwdriver. Deborah was stabbed 12 times, and Jean-Marc was stabbed 24 times, including 9 times in his back. It appeared that Jean-Marc had attempted to fight back, and he had defense wounds on his hands. The officers then found 8-year-old Jacob in his bedroom. The blankets were pulled up and tucked under his chin. But they soon recognized that he too had been stabbed 4 times and his throat was slit. The police were confused as to who could have done such a horrible act until they came across a family photo. It was then that they had realized 12-year-old Jay was missing. Believing she had been kidnapped, they had no idea that she could have been involved in the heinous act. They quickly released an Amber Alert, but once learning more from family and friends, realized that Jay may actually be involved and left willingly. During police investigation, they find out from Jay's friends that at school they heard her talking on the phone with who they assumed was Jeremy about killing her parents. Jeremy's friends also knew about this, as he had asked many of them to help with the act, but they refused. One of his friends even came forward stating that Jeremy had said that he was scared that Jay would break up with him if he didn't go through with the act. At some point, police search Jay's school locker and find a drawing of people on fire and 2 people living happily ever after. I'll be posting this picture on Instagram and Threads, and you can find the link down in the description box. The 2 were also obsessed with the bands Cradle of Filth and Slipknot, which are both known for their graphic lyrics. The next day, 12-year-old Jay and 23-year-old Jeremy Steinecke were arrested in Leader, Saskatchewan, and brought back to Medicine Hat to be interviewed. While the 2 were waiting in jail, they sent each other letters expressing their love for one another and vowed to visit each other no matter what happened. Jeremy then proposed, and Jay accepted. They also compared themselves to the lovers Mickey and Mallory from the movie Natural Born Killers. There's one discrepancy that we may never know the truth to, as Jay claims that Jeremy stabbed her little brother Jacob, but Jeremy says that it was actually Jay who stabbed the little brother. Their excuse for killing Jacob, if that's what you want to call it, was that he was too emotionally sensitive to be orphaned, so he had to die as well. Now, under the Youth Criminal Justice Act in Canada, Jay's name is not allowed to be published after she became a suspect because she was a minor, so there is a publication ban on her name and photos being released in Canada. However, you can find articles online posted from other countries that don't have to follow this law. 12 is the youngest possible age that a person can be charged for a crime, and those under 14 at the time the crime was committed cannot be charged as an adult. In Jay's pre-sentencing psychiatric evaluation, she was described as, quote, seriously disturbed and failed to show any remorse or acceptance of criminal responsibility for her role in the triple murder. It also said she suffered from dependency issues, anxiety, depression, and is prone to immature problem solving and wishful fantasies. They believe that she did not recognize that she had committed a crime, nor did she have any insight into her condition. On July 9, 2007, Jay, who would have then been 13 years old, was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. At the time, and I think she still might be, the youngest person ever to be convicted of multiple murders in Canada. On November 8, 2007, she was sentenced to the maximum for a youth under 14 years old, that being a 10-year sentence. Minus the 18 months that she had already served, she would spend 4 years in a psychiatric institution and 4.5 years under conditional supervision in the community, starting at a group home and then eventually living on her own, meaning at age 22 she would be completely done with her sentence. In September 2011, she started attending classes at Mount Royal University, located in Calgary, Alberta, and was released from the psychiatric hospital in the fall of 2011. The following year, October 2012, she started expressing remorse for her actions that experts deemed genuine. She was described as the poster child for rehabilitation. And in May of 2016, she completed her sentence and was reluctantly cleared of any further court-ordered restrictions, supervision, or conditions. Then in 2020, after not committing crimes for 5 years, her criminal record was expunged because she was a minor when it happened, meaning that from here on out, her criminal record would be clean. And yes, that's just shy of 5 years, but because of the pandemic, they did it early. Jeremy, on the other hand, was not so fortunate, being a grown-ass man and all. After being arrested, police had set up for Jeremy to be transferred to a prison in Calgary, with an undercover officer posed as another inmate. Jeremy instantly told the wired undercover officer that, quote, "You hear about that triple homicide? Yeah, you're looking at him. Me and my old lady have become legends," unquote. And then he continued to tell the officer that the girl slit her brother's throat, saying that it didn't even bother her, she didn't cry or anything, and that, in fact, when they were on the road, on their way to Leader, Saskatchewan, she was laughing about it. And then he said, "She's got a few screws loose too." He continued talking to the officer, describing fantasies of his plans to marry Jay in a Gothic wedding and moving to Germany to live in a castle. And at one point he said, "You ever watch the movie Natural Born Killers? I think that's the best love story of all time." And all of this was recorded, obviously, because yes, he was a fake inmate, but yes, he was wearing a wire. I have a scripted document linked below that you can read the entire conversation between Jeremy and the undercover officer in the back of the paddy wagon, I guess. And so on December 15th, 2008, Jeremy was sentenced to 3 life sentences of 3 charges for the first-degree murder. Luckily for him, he's in Canada and these charges can be served concurrently, meaning that he will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years, which would be in 2031. That's in 6 years, guys. And so, during early court proceedings, the public thought that he would be prosecuted for statutory rape, but this charge was never pursued. In 2012, he changed his name to Jackson May, May being his mother's last name. So, this case leaves us with the ultimate question. Can a person change after committing the unthinkable? Can someone who's taken the lives of their own family members, those that they were supposed to protect, be rehabilitated? It's a question that stirs up deep emotions, testing our idea about justice, forgiveness, and the capacity for transformation. There's no simple answer, but as we've seen, rehabilitation is a multifaceted process that has to be worked at every single day, and I suppose only time will tell. If you have any thoughts, insights, or theories about the Richardson family case, I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me on Instagram at missing.murder.macchiatos. I also have it linked in the description below, along with the sources that I've used for this episode. And I post pictures weekly that go along with every single episode. As well as for this episode, I have a transcript link that's from Jeremy's trip with the undercover officer. So please don't forget to like, follow, leave a 5-star review if you can, and share with your besties so I can continue making content and spreading awareness about these cases. Remember, every cup of coffee can be a moment of conversation and connection, so keep the discussions alive. Join me next week as we dive into another chilling tale, because the truth is often darker than we imagine. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep sipping. Bye for now.